Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. My name's Thomas Carter. Online, people know me as T-Money. I'm 16. Before everything happened, I was just a kid from a small town most people have never heard of. My life mostly revolved around a game called Atrox, a competitive shooter that got big on streaming platforms. I wasn't famous or anything, but I was doing well. I had a team, a couple of small sponsors, and a shot at making a name for myself. My parents supported it, even traveled with me to tournaments. On one condition: I had to keep my grades from slipping. It wasn't a normal life, but it was the one I knew. Back then, everything was about climbing ranks and prepping for the next match. I never thought I'd have to worry about anything else. So, on a warm weekend in late May, I found myself in Chicago for a major LAN event at McCormick Place. It's a huge convention center not too far from downtown. The event was called the Windy City Showdown, and teams from across the country had come in. I'd qualified for the junior bracket. That might not sound big, but if I won, I'd be the youngest champion in the history of the tournament. The prize was $20,000, which is massive for me. My parents had insisted on coming as chaperones, though they mostly just roamed the city while I stayed at the venue. I'm not exactly known for being brave. I talk big on streams, but that's just my online persona. In real life, I'm cautious, especially around new people and strange places. My teammates say I'm closed-minded about everything outside of gaming, and maybe they're right. Usually, I ignore the hustle and bustle around me, keep my head down, and worry about my own plan. That's exactly how I was on that day, Saturday, when the outbreak came crashing into my life. I remember the morning pretty clearly. My alarm on my phone buzzed around 7 a.m., and I scrolled through a bunch of social media notifications. Nothing unusual. Just typical gamer stuff. Memes, match schedules, petty arguments about game balancing. No warning about the chaos that was about to break loose in the city. After a quick shower, I threw on the official tournament hoodie with my gamertag embroidered on the back. My parents and I left the Holiday Inn near the venue around 8 a.m. We hopped into a taxi because the walk was a bit long and my dad didn't feel like dealing with rideshares that morning. The driver talked about the weather, warm, slightly humid. He mentioned something about an odd story on the news. A local hospital is dealing with an influx of patients. At the time, I tuned it out. McCormick Place is massive. Rows and rows of meeting halls, giant exhibit areas. You can fit entire city blocks under that roof. Arriving at the north building, I looked up at the big glass and steel structure looming ahead. Banners for the Windy City Showdown hung near the entrance. Large vinyl signs featuring stylized characters from Atrox, rainbow lights, sponsor logos. The air outside carried a hint of Lake Michigan breeze. Inside, it was typical LAN chaos. Lines of gamers carrying monitors, boxes of keyboards and PCs on dollies, staffers handing out badges. Everyone's eyes flickered with that mix of excitement and sleep deprivation. I felt a sense of relief to be among people who shared my obsession. The first subtle sign that something was off came about an hour later, during check-in. Some security personnel near the entrance looked unusually tense. A staff member kept whispering into her radio, glancing nervously between the doors and the badge counter. I figured they were just dealing with typical event logistics, maybe someone trying to sneak in without a pass. Then, about mid-morning, while I was booting up my computer at the junior bracket area, I saw a group of paramedics rush into a side hall. They were wearing standard navy blue uniforms with reflective patches on their jackets. They moved quickly, pushing a wheeled stretcher. Normally, paramedics on site at a big event aren't that strange. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, twisted ankles happen at these tournaments. But this group looked more urgent, and there was a hush that fell over the crowd in that corner of the room. I remember craning my neck to see, but the paramedics and staff formed a tight circle. Moments later, They hurried out with someone on the stretcher. That person's arms hung over the rails in a way that made me feel queasy. Yet no one said anything, so I just assumed it was a medical emergency that was under control. I pushed the whole moment out of my mind. I had a match to worry about. By noon, I'd already played my first best-of-3 match and won. I felt good. The crowd noise in the expo hall was exhilarating. I'm usually too shy to interact with big groups, so I kept to my station, tinkering with my settings, ignoring the swirl of voices, the glare of stage lights. The staff made an announcement about a scheduled break, so I stood up to stretch. Right then, the main overhead speaker system beeped with a tone that never used to mean much to me. It was the tone that precedes a serious announcement. A woman's voice came through the PA system, sounding oddly calm. Attention attendees, we have a brief announcement. Due to an incident in the city, we advise everyone to remain within McCormick Place until further notice. The building is on a temporary hold for re-entry. We appreciate your cooperation. Her words definitely caught people's attention. A wave of confused chatter swept the room. Some folks pulled out their phones, searching for news updates or local alerts. Others shrugged and kept gaming. I have to admit, I was annoyed. In my mind, I thought, I'm not skipping a single match for some random city problem. Shows how narrow my thinking was, focusing on a silly bracket instead of the big picture. Over the next hour, rumors spread about an illness running rampant in downtown Chicago. Some said it was a chemical spill. Others claimed it was an unknown virus. I noticed staff members whispering, exchanging worried looks and checking the doors. The place started feeling more like a fortress than a convention center. At around 1:30 p.m., my teammate Jordan, our in-game leader, came running over. He'd been out by the snack bar, talking to some older players who were streaming the news on their phones. He said in a low voice, "Dude, you're not going to believe what's happening out there." He tried to show me a shaky live stream that captured part of Michigan Avenue, maybe half a mile north. It was chaotic, glimpses of people staggering, a few uniformed officers chasing someone. Most folks near the camera seemed frantic, trying to get away from something. My first response was frustration. This can't be real. Maybe it's a protest or a robbery or something. I refused to consider the possibility that it was bigger than that. I had no desire to get sidetracked. I just wanted to stay in my bubble and focus on the next match. Maybe that was naive. Or maybe it was just me being a chicken. Like, I didn't want to face something scary, so I denied it existed. By 2 p.m., the rumor mill exploded. The staff announced that the tournament would proceed as planned, but that once people left the building, they couldn't come back in. A building lockdown was in effect, with limited exits. Cell reception started to get spotty, and some folks reported phone calls dropping. The Wi-Fi was also struggling under an onslaught of people checking for updates, live video, or messages from friends and family. I didn't see an actual fight or any direct sign of infected individuals yet, but the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. Attendees formed small groups, comparing notes. I joined a circle of my teammates, but I was restless, pacing around them, tapping my foot. I'd glance at the main doors every few minutes, noticing the worried expression on security guards' faces. I spotted one of the paramedics from earlier. He was near the eastern hallway, talking in a hushed tone to a staff member. Then he slipped through a door that led to a restricted area. His uniform was spattered with something dark near the pocket. My mind wanted to see it as a coffee stain, but it didn't look like coffee. I'll admit I tried to brush off the creeping discomfort. I told Jordan, "Maybe it's just some local crisis. We'll be fine." He looked back at me like I was clueless, because that's probably how I sounded. The exact moment things snapped into pure chaos is etched in my mind. It was close to 3 p.m. A shout echoed from the north side of the expo hall. A crowd parted. I glimpsed a person stumbling, arms at stiff angles, clothes torn. A convention volunteer rushed forward to help, maybe thinking the person was injured. Suddenly, more yells cut through the air. The volunteer scrambled back. I couldn't see perfectly from where I stood, but it looked like the staggering person was trying to reach out to the volunteer in a way that felt unnatural. Then, a second individual appeared, also unsteady and leaning forward at an odd angle. People in that area scattered like a wave receding. Some moved back behind chairs and computer stations. I kept my distance. I was frozen, if I'm being honest. I didn't jump in. I didn't try to help or investigate. I just stood near a row of black curtains that separated the tournament stage from the free play area. A hush fell, followed by a frantic stampede of attendees pushing away from that scene. Security guards rushed in, shouting instructions that were swallowed by the noise. Another guard sprinted to a radio near the staff booth. The building's overhead lighting flickered. That was the first time I noticed how terrifying big open spaces can become if you feel you're not safe. The acoustics turned every scrape, every footstep, into echoes. Jordan and I watched from maybe 30 feet away. One of our friends, Eric, was caught near the infected individuals. Eric was a casual friend I made through local tournaments. He tried to run, but he tripped on a coil of cables from a broadcasting rig. He tumbled to the floor. People were shouting for him to get up, to move. The stumbling figure turned toward him in a rigid way, like a puppet on strings. I saw Eric's eyes go wide. He scrambled backward, used a metal chair to shield himself momentarily. Some staffer lunged forward, maybe trying to tackle the infected person away. I heard one of the staffers exclaim something urgent, though I couldn't catch exact words in all the noise. At that point, Jordan nudged my shoulder. "We gotta help him, man." My mouth went dry. I wanted to do something, call for more security, maybe fling a chair, but my legs wouldn't move. I just shook my head, stepping further behind the black curtain, hoping somehow that staffer could handle it. Jordan, more courageous than me, dashed forward on his own. He waved his arms, catching the infected person's attention, giving Eric time to scramble away. I realized in that instant that my overwhelming instinct was to hide. People say fight or flight. Well, in my case, it was definitely flight. If Jordan hadn't been there, Eric might have been stuck. Suddenly, the overhead speaker beeped again. This time, a man's voice cut in, cracking slightly with stress. "Attention all attendees. We are facing a severe emergency. We ask everyone to remain calm and proceed toward the southwestern exit or any staff-directed shelter-in-place location. The local authorities have advised that an unknown infection is spreading. Please follow staff instructions. This is not a drill." That's when the screaming began in earnest. People scattered in different directions, ignoring the speaker's instructions about heading to the southwestern exit. Some sprinted toward the escalators leading to the parking garage. Others tried to push through the big glass doors, which had been sealed. The sense of safety the building once offered was gone. I got swept along in a crowd heading through an interior hallway. My backpack, with my gaming laptop, banged against my side. Around me, gamers were clutching mechanical keyboards or entire desktop towers. It was surreal to see them still clinging to equipment. Maybe we all clung to the only normal things we had. That was me too. My first thought was that I couldn't just leave my gear behind, as if my digital stats mattered in that moment. Security guards tried to steer people into meeting rooms on the upper floors, away from the expo hall. Some folks complied. Others argued that we should try to escape outside. All I wanted was to not run into one of those infected people. As I hurried with a wave of frightened attendees, I glimpsed staffers dragging tables to block entrances, setting up makeshift barricades. Crashes and shouted warnings echoed behind me. The building's design is mostly wide corridors and big open halls, so any blockade was a temporary measure at best. I ended up in a large meeting room labeled W178, typically used for seminars. The carpet was maroon with swirl patterns, the walls lined with foldable partition panels. About 50 or 60 of us piled in there, breathless and pale. Jordan and Eric made it too, though they were separated from me by a small sea of anxious faces. I found an empty corner near a stack of chairs and hunched down with my back against the wall, hugging my backpack. A staffer wearing a conference badge labeled Operations Manager tried to speak calmly, telling everyone to remain there while they checked the stairwells. A volunteer locked the doors from the inside. I found myself next to a middle-aged man in a business suit who kept fiddling with his phone, whispering that the lines were jammed. The overhead lights in the room buzzed quietly. No one seemed to have a plan beyond waiting. I had the urge to stand up and do something, but what could I do? I'm just a teenager who's good at clicking heads in a game. The only skill I had that might help was my reflexes, but we didn't have any real weapons, except maybe a chair leg or some random tool in the room. And honestly, I was too nervous to volunteer for any duty. Instead, I buried my face in my arms, trying to block out the world. Time crawled in that room. Some said maybe half an hour passed, maybe more. The overhead vents hummed. Occasionally the floor vibrated with distant thuds, possibly from heavy doors being forced open or something else. Whispers rose and fell among the folks around me. Eventually the staffer returned, looking grim. She announced that the southwestern exit was compromised and that large numbers of infected individuals were inside the building. She used that word, infected. She said the authorities weren't picking up calls. Something had happened across Chicago, maybe across more areas than just downtown. I overheard one older gamer near the corner describe what he had seen. He said he watched a group of the infected converge on the loading dock area. They moved in fits, stumbling, but they had an intensity that made them surprisingly fast at times. They targeted uninfected people, latching onto them. I heard him mention how some folks who got caught ended up staggering away minutes later, arms stiff, eyes vacant. No one wanted to dwell on the specifics. For me, hearing that made me press myself even closer to the wall. I was sure I couldn't handle seeing that up close. If I had been braver or more open-minded, maybe I would have offered to help block some doors. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I kept thinking, I'm a kid. This is not my fight. I just need to stay put and survive. The staffer tried to keep everyone calm, though her voice shook. She started distributing bottled water and granola bars from a back closet. Some folks stared at the door handle, expecting it to rattle any second. We learned that the paramedics had been overwhelmed. No one knew exactly how the infection started or where it originated. The rumor was that it could be transmitted by bites, but no official confirmation existed, just secondhand talk. Time dragged on. I lost track of whether it was late afternoon or nearing evening. The overhead lights stayed on, so I couldn't judge the sunlight outside. People's phone screens occasionally glowed as they tried to find signal, but the data network was basically down, overwhelmed or disabled by the crisis. A few text messages were trickling through if you stood by the windows, but it was inconsistent. Jordan eventually came over, leading Eric by the elbow. Eric looked shaky, but not infected. They told me that a small group was planning to move out of the room. If we stay here, we're sitting targets, Jordan said. We need to see if there's a better location, or even get outside somehow. My gut reaction was to refuse. I shook my head, glancing at the locked door. We're safe here, right? They stared back at me like I was clueless. Jordan insisted that the infected were roaming the halls in bigger numbers. Doors could be broken or forced. We should at least scout the area, gather more info. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to be the only coward left behind. So, I mumbled that I'd come, though my grip on my backpack straps was so tight my fingers went numb. Our group ended up being around 8 people, mostly teen gamers with 1 or 2 older esports coaches. I recall a staff volunteer named Alvin. He wore thick glasses and carried a flashlight. He agreed to take point since he knew part of the layout. We quietly unlocked the meeting room door, cracked it open, and peeked into the hallway. It was dim. The overhead lights in that corridor had shut off, possibly from a partial power failure or a manual lockdown procedure. We inched forward, guided by Alvin's narrow flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. After about a minute, we reached an intersection of hallways. Darkness stretched both ways. Another scream echoed from a distant corridor, and that sound made me freeze mid-step. I pressed myself flat against the wall. My pulse thrummed in my ears, if you want to call it that, but I tried not to think about it. Jordan whispered that we should keep going. Alvin said the southwestern escalators, leading to an upper-level walkway, were about 5 minutes away if we took the correct route. The plan was to reach a service corridor that might lead outside, but the possibility of running into infected weighed heavily on everyone. We edged around corners as quietly as possible. Halfway down one corridor, the flashlight beam illuminated a figure crouched near a vending machine. This person jerked upright at the light. I couldn't tell if they were infected or just terrified. Alvin hissed, "Hey, are you okay?" The figure didn't respond. Jordan, who is braver than I'll ever be, took 2 slow steps closer. That's when we saw the figure's posture. They were swaying, one arm twisted at a wrong angle, face partially hidden in shadow. Then they bolted forward with an unsteady but fast shuffle. We scrambled backward. My hands fumbled for something to protect myself. Anything. There was nothing but the empty hallway. One of the older coaches had a metal pipe. I think it was part of a display rack he had ripped off earlier. He stepped up and swung it at the infected individual's legs, and they crumpled to the floor for a moment. The group slid past, trying not to get grabbed. I was nearly at the back, cowering, barely staying behind the others. The infected person clawed at the coach's pant leg, ripping part of the fabric. The coach yanked free and ran. That was my closest encounter so far, and it sent a wave of cold dread through me. I think that's the moment I realized this was real. No video game. No paused respawn. If that infected person had latched onto me, I'd be done. We eventually reached a narrow service hallway with cinder block walls and flickering fluorescent lights. A painted sign said, "Authorized personnel only." Alvin pried open the door with a tool from his pocket. He explained that this corridor might lead toward a loading zone or a staircase. If we could get to the loading dock or a lower-level garage, we might find a route outside. Inside, the air was stuffy. Industrial fans hummed, but at least the hallway was lit better than the main corridors. Our shoes squeaked on the tiled floor. Pipes ran along the ceiling. We passed a storage room where extra chairs and tables were kept. It was eerily silent, no more screams echoing. My anxiety made every small sound feel huge. We reached a junction. One path led to a maintenance room, the other to a set of double doors. Alvin paused to get his bearings. That's when my phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I nearly jumped. I pulled it out, saw a single bar of service. A text message had made it through from my mother. "We are at the hotel. Are you safe? The news is terrifying. Please find a safe place." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of relief that they were alive and guilt that I hadn't messaged them sooner. I tried to type out a reply, but before I could tap send, the service bars disappeared again. I mentally kicked myself for ignoring them for so long. I wanted to blame the situation, but honestly, it was also my own refusal to face how real things were. Alvin decided we should push through the double doors. They led to a concrete loading dock area with roll-up garage doors used for deliveries. We stepped inside carefully. The space was enormous, with trucks parked in bays, pallets of bottled drinks, stage equipment in crates. The lighting was dim, coming from emergency lights near the ceiling. We saw a small cluster of moving figures near a far corner. They appeared to be rummaging or crouching behind a forklift. One had a staff uniform. The others wore everyday clothes. Their motions were erratic. Alvin gestured for us to keep our distance. With quiet steps, we moved around a line of stacked crates, making our way toward an exit sign that glowed green across the room. Suddenly, one of the infected individuals snapped upright and faced us. The entire group turned in unison. They moved with that same disturbing mixture of limp and speed. Our group sprinted for the door, but the infected fanned out, cutting across the open space. One of our teammates, a kid named Lance, stumbled on the edge of a wooden pallet. He crashed to the floor. Another gamer tried to help him up, but the infected were already closing in. The older coach with the metal pipe swung it again, warding them off for a brief moment. Lance clambered up, face pale. We dashed behind a forklift, skirting around the infected by mere feet. I was so focused on escaping that I didn't look back. I just rushed to keep pace with Jordan, who yanked the exit door open. We poured into a narrow stairwell that smelled of mildew and old cleaning supplies. The door slammed behind us. I heard the infected scratching or pushing at it. Alvin jammed the handle with the broken pipe from the coach. It wouldn't hold forever, but maybe long enough for us to climb. The stairwell was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. Alvin guessed it led to a rooftop service area above the convention floor. The steps felt endless. My breathing grew ragged. I tried not to think about my chest or heart or any of that, but you can imagine the state I was in. Eventually, we reached a landing with a heavy metal door labeled Roof Access, Authorized Personnel. Alvin tried the handle. Locked. But the locking mechanism was old. Jordan and Alvin took turns slamming into it until it creaked. The entire door frame groaned. We could hear more unsettling noises below, like the infected might be making progress on the jammed door. That gave us motivation to keep pushing. Finally, the door gave way. We spilled out onto a concrete rooftop area. The sky had grown overcast, an evening gloom settling in. I peered over a low retaining wall and saw downtown Chicago in the distance. Even from that vantage, I could discern smoke columns rising. The city skyline looked eerie without its usual spark of life. No planes, no bustling traffic, just a hush broken by occasional sirens echoing across the miles. There was a sense of fragile relief up there. No infected individuals in immediate sight. The group stood in a rough circle, catching our breath. Alvin found a cell tower node near the corner of the roof, but it offered no better signal. Lance sat heavily against an AC unit, pressing his forehead to his knees, whispering that he was done, that he couldn't keep running. I wanted to tell him to pull it together, but I didn't, because I knew exactly how he felt. We debated our options under the darkening sky. Stay on the roof, find a way off the building, try to contact the outside world. The older coach was in favor of heading back downstairs to look for more survivors. Alvin wanted to see if there was a separate fire escape that led all the way down to street level on the southwestern side. Jordan argued that we needed to check the parking garage, where some vehicles might still be accessible. I, for one, just wanted to stay put until morning. The idea of descending into the building again made me want to freeze. But the others pointed out that the roof could be a dead end if the infected gathered below. Supplies were limited. The weather might turn worse. We had to move, or at least secure a safer place before dark. After some nervous debate, we decided to attempt to cross over to an adjacent rooftop that connected to a walkway leading into the parking structure. Alvin recalled that certain areas of McCormick Place had bridging walkways. If we could reach the structure, maybe we'd find a car with keys in the ignition, or a place to barricade ourselves. We made our way carefully across the rooftop. The wind picked up, rattling a loose metal grate. A handful of seagulls circled overhead, maybe from the lake. In the fading light, the city took on an orange glow, especially around the horizon. I spotted a line of cars on a nearby freeway, all at a standstill. Eventually, we found a short ladder that led to a slightly higher section of the roof. From there, we spied a metal bridge that spanned a small gap to a neighboring building section. This was used by maintenance crews. The gap below was maybe 15 feet of open air. If you slipped, you'd land on a lower roof. It wouldn't necessarily be fatal, but it looked painful enough to avoid. We helped each other climb. I was last to go. My legs shook when I realized how high up we were. Jordan called for me to hurry. I shuffled across the metal bridge, focusing on each step. The surface rattled with my weight. It felt as though any strong gust might pitch me off. Once across, We found a hatch-like door in the rooftop that apparently led down into the next building section. Alvin tried it. Locked again. This time we searched for something to pry it open, eventually using the metal pipe, which was bent out of shape from earlier. With a groan, the hatch gave. We descended a metal ladder into a dark upper corridor, different from the one we had just come from. The air felt closer here, like no one had used this space in ages. Emergency lights flickered. A sign on the wall read, "Skywalk Access." That was what we needed. We followed the corridor to a set of glass doors that opened onto a skywalk, a covered walkway about 2 stories above ground. It connected this part of McCormick Place to a parking garage across the street. The glass windows of the skywalk gave us a panoramic view of the street below. I glimpsed abandoned cars, some with doors open. A few figures limped around, but not in large groups. Inside the skywalk, we saw a few more individuals, thankfully not infected. They looked like staff or volunteers. Their faces lit up with relief when they saw us. We quickly locked the skywalk doors behind us. Now we had a temporary vantage point to watch the street. The lights inside the walkway were dim, with only a few functioning bulbs overhead. One staff member, wearing a half-ripped name badge reading Zoe, told us that the parking garage below might have vehicles, but there was no guarantee of keys. She'd heard that one security guard had a set of universal override keys for the city fleet cars, but it was uncertain if that guard was still alive or in the building. I was fine with trying to hole up in the skywalk, but the rest were determined to keep moving. We were so close to a potential exit. We just had to brave the parking structure and hope we didn't run into a swarm. The other folks in the skywalk, about 5 in total, joined us, bringing the group to around 13. We carefully made our way across the walkway to a stairwell that led into the multi-level parking garage. The place had a low concrete ceiling, rows of cars, and a few flickering overhead lights. Dim shadows stretched in every direction. The random shapes of parked vehicles gave plenty of hiding spots for infected. We stuck together, weaving around cars on the second level of the garage. The smell of exhaust and rubber lingered in the stagnant air. Occasionally, we came across a car with an open door or smashed window. We guessed people had fled in a hurry. Alvin tested a few vehicles to see if keys were left inside. No luck. Then, near a black SUV with tinted windows, we saw a figure lying halfway out the driver's seat. Approaching cautiously, Jordan tapped the figure's shoulder. No response. It didn't move. Possibly already gone. We stayed back just in case. The car keys were on the floorboard. Jordan swallowed hard and reached in, hooking the keys with 2 fingers, then carefully backed away. The figure did not stir. The group exchanged hopeful glances, but our luck soured quickly when we realized the SUV had a drained battery or some mechanical issue. It wouldn't start. The engine clicked, but never turned over. We decided to keep searching. Our footsteps echoed as we descended a ramp to the first level. We passed a battered security kiosk. The glass was cracked, and the desk inside was toppled. That's where we found a ring of keys, possibly the universal set that Zoe had mentioned. One was clearly labeled with a city emblem, though we weren't certain how many cars it might fit. As we regrouped near a row of cars, we heard a commotion from the ramp we had just come down. A cluster of infected rushed into view. They must have followed our noise or sniffed out our presence. I froze, my mind blank. My mouth went dry. Jordan shouted for everyone to spread out, find a vehicle we could start. The older coach and Alvin started rattling car doors, testing the newly found keys. Meanwhile, the infected advanced rapidly, weaving between vehicles. A few people in our group tried to repel them, with whatever blunt objects they could find. A tire iron, a plastic pipe, anything. I found myself near a compact sedan. The door was unlocked. I slid into the driver's seat, forgetting momentarily that I didn't even have a license. My hands shook badly as I tried to jab the universal key into the ignition. No match. The key didn't fit. Panicked, I flung it aside and tried another. That one fit, but turning it did nothing except flash the dashboard lights. The engine refused to fire. A shriek from behind made me glance up through the rearview mirror. An infected person had lunged over the hood of a nearby car, grappling with someone from the skywalk group. People scrambled, climbing over seats, some stumbling onto the floor. Suddenly, from the row behind me, an engine roared to life. One of the older coaches had managed to start a battered brown station wagon. He yelled for everyone who could get there to jump in. Folks sprinted to it. I was stuck at the sedan's wheel, every muscle locked in terror. The wagon reversed, headlights swinging wildly across the concrete pillars. Jordan's voice cut through the chaos. "Thomas, come on!" He waved from the open passenger door of the station wagon. I forced myself out of the sedan. My legs almost gave out when I saw two infected individuals converging near the driver's side. I ducked beneath one reaching arm, my eyes fixed on that station wagon. The vehicle crept forward slowly, not wanting to leave without me, but also needing to avoid the swarm. I managed the final few steps. Eric yanked me inside. The door slammed. The coach at the wheel floored the gas pedal. We sped across the garage floor, weaving past scattered bodies, some moving, some not. The infected hammered on the windows but fell behind. We crashed through a lowered security gate at the exit, bending metal with a loud squeal. Daylight, or rather the murky gloom of early evening, hit us as we careened out onto the street. Our haphazard escape took us onto Cermak Road, near where McCormick Place sits. The street was littered with abandoned cars. Some of them had no lights on. Others had hazard blinkers still flashing. We saw small groups of infected wandering sidewalks. The coach had to swerve onto partial sidewalks or around corners to avoid collisions. The city felt surreal. There was a pall of smoke in the air. Far in the distance, I could make out the sound of emergency sirens, but I couldn't see any flashing lights. Downtown skyscrapers loomed, silent except for an occasional flicker of interior lights. This was Chicago, usually busy and loud. To see it like this was beyond unsettling. We spotted a police barricade about 2 blocks ahead. 2 squad cars were angled across the intersection. Whether they had officers still present, we couldn't tell. The station wagon slowed. We debated whether to approach or turn back. Ultimately, we risked it. No one appeared around the squad cars. The barricade looked hastily abandoned. We squeezed the station wagon between one squad car and a lamppost. On the sidewalk, I saw a policeman's hat lying near a bag of equipment, but no officer in sight. We continued in the station wagon until we reached a small convenience store that appeared relatively unscathed. The sign above it read, "Cermak Corner Mart." The coach pulled into the parking lot. Only a single infected individual was visible at the far end of the lot, stumbling away from us. We took a chance and parked near the entrance. The idea was to quickly grab any supplies, bottled water, snacks, before deciding where to go next. Jordan and Alvin ventured inside. The rest of us huddled in or around the wagon. I was too shaken to argue or go in. My hands wouldn't steady. Through the open door, I heard them rummaging among the store aisles. Glass shattered at some point. Maybe they broke into a locked cabinet. Then they emerged with plastic bags full of whatever non-perishables they could find. We hurried back into the vehicle, distributing bottled water and some random energy bars. I scarfed down an energy bar without really tasting it. My entire focus was on the horizon, scanning for movement. The coach decided we should try heading west, away from downtown, aiming for the highway that leads toward the suburbs. Maybe the infection hadn't spread as much out there, or authorities had set up a safe zone. We drove along side streets, zigzagging to avoid traffic jams. Sometimes we had to reverse and find another route if the road was blocked or teeming with infected. I saw small glimpses of humanity along the way. People boarded up in shops, a family huddled inside a minivan, a group waving from an office window. It felt like the city was splintering into pockets of survivors. At one intersection, we paused to check our phones. No signal. The coach tried the radio. Nothing but static. Then, for a few seconds, we caught a broken broadcast. "Please move to designated shelter zones. National Guard is mobilizing. Avoid city centers. And then it was gone. We had no idea where those zones were, or if they even existed. As night fell, the streets grew darker. City lights flickered in scattered patches. Infected wandered intersections or clustered around wrecked cars. We drove in silence, each turn slower than the last. Eventually, we reached a quiet residential block, old brick apartments, trees lining the sidewalk. The coach decided we should stop, save fuel, find shelter. We checked a few units. Most were empty. One had a door forced open. Finally, we found a small corner apartment that was intact. The coach and Jordan did a sweep. No one inside. We dragged a couch against the door and settled in. There wasn't much to eat. Water bottles, granola, some snacks we'd grabbed earlier. I sat in a corner holding my backpack, trying not to think at all. No one really slept. Sirens came and went. Trash cans clattered somewhere in the alley. Shadows moved outside, and every time they did, I stopped breathing. In the pale light of a flashlight, Jordan gave me a look that said everything without words. We were lucky, but this was just the beginning. By dawn, the street outside was still and grey. A few cars sat abandoned. No infected in sight. It didn't feel safe, just paused. None of us knew what came next. Maybe the National Guard was out there. Maybe not. Back when the tournament started, I really believed winning was everything. That a title, a name on a leaderboard, meant something. But 12 hours later, none of that mattered. I saw how small I really was. I watched other people step up while I hesitated. I held back when I should have helped. It's not something I'm proud of. I'm not telling this to make myself sound brave. I just want whoever's listening to understand how fast everything can fall apart. How easy it is to think you're in control, until you're not. When it happens, you won't make it by being the best. You'll make it by holding on to whoever's still standing beside you. My name is Thomas Carter, T-Money Online. I used to think life was about the next match. Now, I know better. The real challenge isn't winning, it's making it through to the next day. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.